My family stole $180K for my sister's wedding, but when they sent me a fake invitation to humiliate me, I exposed everything to her fiancé and the wedding was canceled. I sued them, and now they're begging for money. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing for a mid-sized company, and if someone had told me a year ago that my own parents were going to steal my identity to finance my sister's wedding, I would have laughed in their face. But here we are. And the truth is, there are still days when I can't believe all this actually happened. I guess I should start at the beginning. I mean, not the very beginning, but at the moment when everything went to hell. It was a normal Tuesday, I think. I was at the office reviewing some social media campaigns when my cell phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer because I thought it was spam, but something made me pick up. It was a woman from the bank, super friendly, congratulating me on the approval of my $180,000 loan. And there I was standing like an idiot thinking, what loan? I told her there must be a mistake, that I hadn't applied for any loan. And she was silent for a second and then said, well, it says here that you applied 3 weeks ago and it was approved yesterday. The money would be transferred in 2 days. I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on me. I asked her to send me all the documents by email and hung up shaking. Literally, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I locked myself in an empty conference room and opened the email on my phone. There were all the documents. My name, my social security number, my address, everything. And at the end, a signature that was supposed to be mine. I stared at it for like 5 minutes trying to process what I was seeing. The signature looked like mine. Like, someone had done a good job trying to copy it. But I know my own signature and that wasn't it. There were small differences in how they made the M, in the angle of the letters. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Someone had forged my signature to take out $180,000 in my name. $180,000. Who does that? Who has access to all my personal information? And then, the answer hit me like a truck. My parents. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made in a completely twisted way. Let me backtrack a bit so you understand the context. I'm the oldest of 2 sisters, me and Ashley, who's 28 years old. And if I tell you that my parents have always preferred Ashley, I'm not exaggerating even a little. It's something the whole family knows, that my aunts comment on in low voices at gatherings, that I've known since I was like 10 years old. When we were kids, Ashley always had everything. The new toys, the brand name clothes, the ballet classes, piano classes, whatever else. I had Ashley's used stuff, or the cheap versions of what she had. My parents always had an excuse, that Ashley was more delicate, that she needed more attention, that I was the oldest and should understand. And I understood, I guess. Or at least I swallowed my feelings and kept going. When it came time for college, guess what happened? My parents paid for all of Ashley's college. An expensive private one that cost like $50,000 a year. I had to take out student loans and work 2 part-time jobs to pay for a state university. When I asked them why they couldn't help me the same way, my mom told me they had already done what they could, that Ashley needed that support because she wasn't as independent as me, that I had always been the strong one. The strong one. As if being ignored and neglected made me strong instead of just making me feel invisible. Anyway, I graduated, got a good job, paid off my loans little by little over the years. I was saving to start my own digital consulting business, something I had wanted to do forever. I had good credit because I always paid everything on time, never fell behind on anything. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a 2015 Toyota, nothing extravagant, but I was proud of what I had built alone, without anyone's help. Ashley, on the other hand, still lived at my parents' house, worked on and off at I don't know what jobs that never lasted more than 6 months, and like a year ago she met Brandon, this guy who supposedly came from a family with money. My parents were super excited, as if Ashley had won the lottery. They got engaged after only 8 months of dating, and from that moment the only thing my family talked about was the wedding. Ashley's wedding. Every family dinner, every phone call, every text message, everything was about the perfect dress, the perfect venue, the perfect cake. I nodded and smiled and tried to seem interested, but inside I was thinking, here we go again. Everything is about Ashley. So, there I was in that conference room looking at those fake documents, and everything started to make sense. I called my boss, told him I had a family emergency, and left the office. I drove straight to my parents' house, which was like half an hour from my work. The whole way I was practicing it was going to say, how I was going to confront them. But when I arrived and saw their faces, everything I had planned to say evaporated. My mom opened the door with a smile that froze on her face when she saw me. I guess my expression said it all. I walked in without being invited and told them, I need to talk to you now. My dad was in the living room watching TV, and when he saw my face, he immediately got serious. I showed them the documents on my phone and asked, can you explain this to me? My mom went pale. Literally, I saw her turn white, and my dad stayed quiet looking at the floor. Then I knew it was true, that it really had been them. I waited. The silence was unbearable. Finally, my dad said, Mia, we can explain. And I exploded. I yelled at them. Explain what? That you committed fraud? That you forged my signature to take out a $180,000 loan in my name? My mom started crying and saying we had no other choice, that Brandon's family had refused to pay for certain wedding extras, that Ashley wanted, that they didn't have the money but they knew I had good credit, that Ashley deserved the wedding of her dreams, that I would understand because we're family. Can you believe it? They really thought I was going to understand. I asked them if they had lost their minds, if they realized what they did was a federal crime, that they could go to prison for this. My dad raised his voice and told me I was exaggerating, that it was just a loan, that they would eventually pay it. I asked him how, if they didn't even have good jobs, if they were living day to day. They told me they would find a way, that I was being selfish, that I had always been the resentful sister who couldn't be happy for Ashley. I left there crying with rage. I drove aimlessly for I don't know how long until I calmed down enough to think clearly. The first thing I did was go straight to a coffee shop, search for lawyers specializing in identity fraud on my phone, and schedule a consultation for the next day. Then I called the bank again, spoke with a supervisor, and filed a formal complaint saying someone had committed fraud using my identity. They told me they were going to start an investigation, and that in the meantime, they would freeze any disbursement of the loan. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning in bed, thinking about everything, about years and years of being ignored, of being the second choice, of watching my parents give everything to Ashley while they left me to fend for myself. And now this. This was the last straw. Not only had they ignored me, now they had stolen from me. They had used me. I felt dirty, betrayed in a way I can't even explain. It's your family, you know? Your family is supposed to take care of you, protect you, and they had basically destroyed me financially for a wedding, for a party that would last one day. The next morning, I went to the lawyer. He was an older guy, like 55 years old, who had seen cases like mine before. He told me it was one of the clearest cases of family fraud he had seen, that I had all the evidence I needed. He explained the process to me, told me we could file criminal charges or reach a civil settlement, but that I needed to be prepared because this was going to destroy my relationship with my family. I told him that relationship was already destroyed, that there was no going back after this. The following weeks were hell. The bank's investigation moved quickly because the evidence was obvious. My parents had used documents that only they could have had access to, information that only family would know. The bank completely froze the loan, and my parents started calling me desperately, leaving me voicemails crying, saying I was going to ruin Ashley's wedding. How could I do this to them? Ashley also called me, yelling at me, telling me I was a horrible sister, that I had always been jealous of her, that I was ruining the most important day of her life. But here comes the part that still makes my blood boil. Like 2 weeks after all this, I received a physical invitation to Ashley's wedding. I opened it, and it was beautiful. Super expensive, with gold lettering and everything. The date was in a month, and the venue address was in a city like 3 hours from where I lived. At first I thought, are they really inviting me after all this? Do they have the nerve? Something didn't add up. I looked up the address on Google Maps, and it was just a street. There was no event hall, no venue, nothing. I started to suspect. I called my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, who had always been kind of neutral in all this, and asked her if she had received an invitation. She told me no. That in fact Ashley had postponed the wedding indefinitely because there were problems with financing. That's when I knew something weird was going on. On the day of the supposed wedding, I decided to go. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I needed to know what was happening. I drove the 3 hours to that address. And guess what I found? An empty parking lot. Literally, an abandoned parking lot in the middle of nowhere. I sat there in my car for like 20 minutes trying to process what this meant. Then I got a text message from an unknown number with a picture of me standing next to my car in that parking lot. The message said, "Did you really think we were going to invite you? This is what you deserve for ruining your sister's life." I felt physically sick. They had done this on purpose. They had sent me a fake invitation just to humiliate me, to make me drive 3 hours and look like an idiot. I called the number, but no one answered. Then I got another message, this time from Ashley, from her real number, laughing, saying, "How does it feel, Mia? How does it feel to be made to look bad? Now you know how you made me feel when you ruined my wedding." I drove back home crying the whole way, not from sadness, but from pure rage. When I got there, I sat in my apartment and made a decision. If they wanted war, they were going to get war. Up until that moment, I had tried to keep everything private, to handle it only with lawyers and the bank, but I was fed up. I searched for Brandon on social media, found his Instagram, which was public, and sent him a long direct message, explaining the whole situation, attaching copies of the fraudulent loan documents, the bank reports, everything. I told him he had a right to know that his future wife and his future in-laws had committed identity fraud to finance their wedding, and that if he was going to marry her, he should know what family he was getting into. I did the same with several of Ashley's close friends that I knew from before, people who had been commenting on her wedding posts. It wasn't cheap revenge, it was simply exposing the truth. Things exploded fast. Brandon confronted Ashley, who apparently tried to deny it at first, but eventually had to admit that she knew about the loan, that she had agreed with my parents' plan. Brandon was furious. Not only because they had committed fraud, but because Ashley had lied to him directly. He canceled the engagement immediately. His family, who apparently did have principles, cut all communication with Ashley and my parents. My parents called me hysterical. My mom was screaming that I had destroyed Ashley's life. How could I be so cruel? So vindictive? My dad threatened to sue me. With, I don't know what else. Ashley sent me like 50 text messages, some crying, others insulting me with words I don't even want to repeat. Everyone blamed me, as if I had been the one who committed fraud, as if I had done something wrong. The cognitive dissonance was incredible. Meanwhile, the bank's investigation was completed. They officially confirmed that it had been fraud, that the signature was fake, that the entire loan had been obtained illegally. They informed me that I was not responsible for any part of the debt, and that they were reporting the case to the appropriate authorities. They offered me assistance to make sure my credit wasn't affected and put fraud alerts on all my accounts. A month later, my parents received notification that they could face criminal charges. Their lawyer contacted me through mine, offering a settlement. Basically, they wanted to reach a settlement where they would pay me a substantial amount, not to proceed with a civil lawsuit, and I wouldn't push for additional criminal charges. My lawyer told me it was a good offer, that although what they did was horrible, the criminal process could take years and cause me more stress. I talked to my Aunt Linda, who had been the only person in the family who hadn't judged me through this whole disaster. She told me to do whatever was best for my peace of mind, that I didn't owe anyone anything. I thought a lot about that. In the end, I accepted the settlement. My parents had to sell some things, take out a loan with collateral on their house, and get the money from I don't know where else. But they paid me. It was enough to cover what I had planned to use from my savings for my business and more. I used that money to finally launch my digital consulting company. I've had it for 6 months now, and it's going better than I expected. I have 3 regular clients and several freelance projects. I moved to a new apartment in another part of the city, changed my phone number, blocked my parents and Ashley on all social media. I haven't spoken to any of them since we signed the settlement. Sometimes I feel guilty, you know? Not for what I did, but for not feeling sadder about losing my family. But then I remember that I never really had that family. Not really. What I had was people who used me, who ignored me, who saw me as a resource and not as a person. And honestly, I'm better off without that in my life. My Aunt Linda visits me from time to time. We have coffee and talk. She tells me that Ashley still lives with my parents, that she hasn't gotten another boyfriend, that she blames the whole disaster of her life on me. My parents apparently tell everyone that I'm an ungrateful daughter, who abandoned them. I don't care what they say. The people who matter The people who really know me know the truth. Last week, I was working in my apartment when I got a message from an unknown number. It was Ashley. It said my parents were having financial problems, that they needed help, asking if I could contribute something. I read it, laughed, and blocked it without responding. I don't owe them anything, not money or explanations or my time. That part of my life closed, and I'm not going to open it again. Did I do the right thing? Honestly, there are still days when I don't know. There are nights when I wake up and think about everything that happened, about how they could do that to me, about whether they ever really loved me. But then I look at my life now, my business that's growing, my apartment that's completely mine, the peace I feel without having to deal with their constant drama, and I think, yes, it was worth it. Sometimes the price of your mental health and your dignity is letting go of people, even if those people are your family. And that's okay, I guess. Not all stories have happy endings where everyone reconciles and hugs. Sometimes the happy ending is simply being free.